Good Thursday morning. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop with the Center Square. Go to thecentersquare.com to get the latest headlines where you can sign up for the newsletter. Not just about what's going on in Illinois, but across the country. Again, go to thecentersquare.com. We're going to talk about several stories you'll find there. One about the U.S. Supreme Court in their ruling giving Congressman Mike Bost standing in an elections-related lawsuit challenging the state's ability to count ballots up to 2 weeks after Election Day. So we'll review some of the Supreme Court action and how that impacts Illinois, but we'll also talk a little bit about tax increases being discussed at the Illinois Statehouse and what that could look like. Wow, the state faces possible shortfalls in spending from the federal tax funds. So all of that here with Illinois in Focus Daily, with you each and every weekday morning. Again, go to the website, thecentersquare.com, and subscribe here on YouTube for the daily show. And a lot of things coming at you, especially here in Illinois, but also across the country. So we'll definitely keep you posted on all those things and more. So again, today you've got more action possible at the Illinois Senate with them in, and then we have the House coming in next week. Governor J.B. Pritzker doesn't have any events today. Of course, Congress is still doing what they do, and the president's making headlines all over. Go to thecentersquare.com to get the latest of what's going on in Washington, D.C. But stay tuned, because coming back, we'll talk about your tax dollars in the state of Illinois. And it's going to be budget season here pretty quick, with the governor set to give his budget address next month for a proposed spending plan. Will it be a continued increase in spending? And what are going to be the justifications for that increase in spending? And how are you going to find that extra revenue? Those are some questions that obviously the Statehouse is going to be tackling in the months ahead before that May 31st adjournment date. So a lot of discussions going to be had. Will it be had in public, or will they have closed door conversations? And what are those conversations going to be? Obviously all key crucial questions that you, the taxpayer, are waiting to hear about. So stay tuned. We'll delve into a little bit of budget talk and tax increase talk coming up next with Illinois in Focus Daily, only with the Center Square.
We can't replace the federal funding. It's too large. And I think the federal government doesn't understand the damage that they're doing to people all across the country. We're not alone in this. It wasn't targeted at Illinois. This is all across the United States, and it's billions of dollars.
It's Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker yesterday talking about the possibility of frozen federal tax funds to the state of Illinois and elsewhere as the budget season kicking off in Illinois next month, with Governor J.B. Pritzker set to deliver his spending plan. But where are we at right now? Obviously, there's a lot of numbers to talk about here. The Illinois budget includes state tax funds, but also federal pass-through funds. So when you hear a lot of the reporting out there about state tax funds, we're only talking about half of the budget, if not less than half. This current fiscal year, we're set to spend $55+ billion, and that is $16 billion more annually than what was spent when Pritzker took office in 2019. And it's about a 40-some-odd% increase in state spending. So you're talking about pretty sizable spending increase, and what are you getting for that? Obviously, in that same time, we've seen a lot of taxes increase. But you can go and take a look at some of this spending yourself. Go to budget.illinois.gov, where you can scroll around and find the fiscal year 2026 information, and you got a budget walk down, which give you an overview of some of the state spending, and all of this is in millions when you look at this chart. So, for instance, total resources, that's the amount of money coming in, $55.2 billion, almost $55.3 billion. All that's coming from individual income taxes, $28.4 billion. That's how much income taxes are derived from individuals in the state of Illinois with that flat income tax. Net corporate taxes, $5.2 billion. You've got sales taxes at $10.7 billion. Utility taxes, $686 million. And other sources at $3.2 billion. So total state sources, $48.3 billion in different types of revenue streams. Then you get other state sources like lottery, gaming, adult use cannabis, $122 million in taxes from that, $281 million in sports wagering, and then other transfers of $1.3 billion, and that could be coming from different funds. So altogether, total state resources, $51 billion. And there are some federal resources there, $4.2 billion for total spend from the state, $55.2 billion. And it gives you even a further breakdown of all of the different sectors where we've seen increases. Again, we've seen a 40% increase plus of the budget since Pritzker took office, but you can also look at some of these line items, and there are significant increases in those line items as well for like healthcare and human services and such. So that's the budget walk down from the governor's Office of Management and Budget. You can also look at the comptroller's website to see how we're doing monthly by going and searching for the monthly summary of general funds revenues and expenditures on the Illinois Comptroller's website. And say we want to look at last month. So we'll look at last month's report for fiscal year 26, zoom in a little bit, and this kind of shows you where we're at in the amount of money that's coming in and out from the comptroller's office. And Comptroller Shoshana Mendoza is the one who cuts the checks. So you can read those reports as well. It's not the only place you can get report. You can also get reports from the Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability. This is a bipartisan budget group that is made up of equal parts Democrat legislators, equal parts Republican legislators from both chambers. And they produce monthly budgets, and you can see kind of what's inside this most recent issue for December. Another positive month for general funds receipts, elevating first half gains, fiscal year of 26. Looks at revenue tables, closer look at cannabis taxes. Cannabis taxes obviously is very, people want to know where that money's going, and it goes to all kinds of places. Quarter of it, for instance, goes to nonprofit community groups in areas that are considered disadvantaged. So every quarter of a dollar of cannabis taxes that people pay goes to that. And there's, portions for law enforcement and public health and such. But anyways, so you can look at all of this and you read up, and it's very wordy and as far as, having to understand economics, but you can see where we're at compared to last year in, general funds coming in and the change, 5.9% in general funds increasing. So you've got some increased dollars coming in. So what's that going to mean for the state of Illinois as we've looked at this picture here? We're halfway through the fiscal year. So Illinois' fiscal year doesn't start January 1st like the city of Chicago does, for instance. Illinois' fiscal year starts July 1st. So that's why May 31st is kind of that cutoff date for the legislature to approve a budget. In February, you've got the governor that's going to propose his budget during his State of the State and budget address. They used to have those separate, but I think the Rauner administration consolidated that, and Pritzker just continued that. So we'll have that sometime next month. We'll be watching that closely here with the Center Square. So go to thecentersquare.com to stay up to date. But let's hear what Governor J.B. Pritzker said yesterday to the prospect of the state of Illinois missing out on federal tax funds that President Donald Trump has been threatening to withhold from the states. And all of this is going to be tied up in the courts, but Pritzker saying that these most recent proclamations for cutting or freezing certain funds, it's going to hit the states really hard, including the state of Illinois.
Well, as you know, we're introducing our budget, in another month, so we're going to be looking at how we might be able to continue to support with more state dollars than we already have, so that we can maintain particularly, you've hit on it, it's particularly the personnel that work at these healthcare institutions that do just amazing work. Working at a substance use treatment center or working with mental health patients, it's hard work. And by the way, these people go to school for quite some time to get prepared for that kind of a job. If we lose them, they will go get a job somewhere where they can, and if we lose them to the state of Illinois, it means, again, that we're losing the opportunity to serve people in our state. So, again, with all of the funding cuts that the administration has taken away from us, it has been probably the most challenging year of my governorship, because we can't replace the federal funding. It's too large. And I think the federal government doesn't understand the damage that they're doing to people all across the country. We're not alone in this. It wasn't targeted at Illinois. This is all across the United States, and it's billions of dollars.
Now, Governor J.B. Pritzker, of course, has proposed increasing taxes on the wealthy. And he put a lot of his own money politically into the income tax change that was proposed to voters but rejected back in 2020. And that constitutional ballot referendum did not get the required votes that was necessary to change. How exactly that's going to play out for the economy, and will that just mean people are moving to other states to get away from the millionaires surcharge? So you're going to hear a lot more about this, and I think it's something that Speaker Chris Welch last week at the City Club of Chicago made clear is going to be part of the discussion this budget year.
There's a lot of folks in this room that will tell you that Illinois has a revenue problem. Some will disagree with that passionately, and we're allowed to do that. But some believe we have a revenue problem. And, quite honestly, to solve a lot of the issues that we're going to have to address over the years, we're going to have to honestly address that revenue question. And I have said this in every town hall meeting I've had, so I'm not breaking news, that I believe we should tax rich people. We should tax millionaires, very similar to the way they do it in Massachusetts. A surcharge tax, we tested that twice on a ballot, and people still support surcharge taxes on millionaires. We know we have a revenue problem, and if we had more revenue, and that's one way to do it, you can address pensions. But I think we should have these discussions.
These discussions going to be had all, spring long during spring legislative session. And we've got the team with the Center Square to keep an eye on that and inform you all throughout. But when we talked with Democratic State Representative Anthony DeLuca about the prospect of millionaires surcharge, he says, even as a Democrat, he wants to make sure that spending is under control.
Well, if there's going to be, and that's kind of what I'm referring to, if there's going to be an attempt to raise additional revenue, however that's going to look, in my opinion, it has to come with reforms. Can't just throw more money at the same problem. So unless we have real structural reform with our property tax system, and some of those are difficult choices, then, I don't know how you can just raise the revenue but not do the work on the other side. Has to be a combination of both.
So DeLuca seeming to come from it from a fiscally conservative point of view. State Representative Adam Niemerg, a Republican, he says that it's no wonder the state is looking to increase taxes on millionaires. He says that Democrats are poorly managing the state's taxpayers' resources.
Unfortunately, Speaker Welch is talking about additional taxes. He's teeing up additional taxes to tax more in the state of Illinois. He just said that just recently. About raising taxes. I think he told you that they're going to look at raising taxes. So instead of cutting costs, cutting spending, they continue to look at tax and spend.
So the Statehouse going to be full force, not this month per se, but a little bit next month, definitely in March and April, and May is going to be an absolute marathon session to come together for a budget, right? But in the meantime, you're going to hear all kinds of other issues being brought up, including the issue of property taxes. State Senator Willie Preston, he had a news conference earlier this week in Springfield, and he talked about a new group he's wanting to start to ensure that there's focus on property tax fairness in a state that has the highest property taxes in the nation.
When it happens, the family doesn't just lose the house, they lose all of the equity in the home, sometimes a lifetime of work. While investors walk away with a profit. Let me emphasize what this bill does not do. It does not forgive taxes. It does not let anyone skip responsibility. It does not harm municipalities. In order for us to really get the reforms we need, we're going to have to work in a bipartisan fashion to make sure that we have complete buy-in throughout the state of Illinois.
We need a forensic audit on all of this, the whole school system, even the charter, all of that, because that's the only way we're going to be able to clean up some of this swamp.
So you heard from Zoe Lee from Chicago Flips Red talking about the need for audits, and that conversation's also ongoing, and whether or not the state's going to get a handle on some of those audits that have already been published from 2.5 years ago, showing adverse opinions in state spending and handling of federal resources, showing qualified opinions, both of which are negative, indicating that auditors couldn't track the dollars and follow the money. Is anything going to be done about that at the Statehouse? From audits from 2.5 years ago and beyond, we don't know what we spent last year, and here we are getting ready to talk about crafting the fiscal plan for the next fiscal year, and we're not going to know what we spent in this fiscal year, until 2.5 years after it's done. So a lot of things in Illinois that have to be, well, I guess, have a light shined on it, and that's obviously what we do here with Illinois in Focus Daily. Each and every weekday morning with you, I'm Greg Bishop, and get the latest headlines at thecentersquare.com.
Have a practice that 80% of the public thinks, violates the preferred practice, they should have an explanation in the courts as to why, from the courts as to why this is allowed to occur.
The U.S. Supreme Court giving Illinois Congressman Mike Bost a victory yesterday in a ruling saying he has standing to sue the State Board of Elections over ballots being counted 2 weeks after an election year. Or an election day. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Wake up with us each and every weekday morning here for the latest. And we've been watching the U.S. Supreme Court closely for a whole host of other issues outside of Mike Bost's challenge that he brought several years ago, including the gun ban challenge that the Supreme Court is set to go into conference to consider tomorrow, and that challenge coming out of Cook County. But you also have other litigation within the U.S. Supreme Court that's impacting Illinois, including this case coming out yesterday. So a lot of different things happening, and at the U.S. Supreme Court, they ruled that Congressman Mike Bost, he does have standing to sue the State Board of Elections. Another headline from the Center Square: U.S. Supreme Court allows Illinois rep to sue over late ballots. Andrew Rice reporting for the Center Square. He reports that the U.S. Supreme Court in a 7-2 decision said an Illinois congressman has the right to sue over counting federal election ballots beyond Election Day. Mike Bost of Murfreesboro filed a lawsuit against the state in 2022 for counting ballots postmarked on Election Day up to 2 weeks later. The court affirmed Bost had legal standing to sue without addressing whether states could allow mail-in ballots received after Election Day to be counted. Chief Justice John Roberts, in a majority opinion for the court, said individuals who sue must display a personal stake in a case to have standing as a candidate for office. Roberts said Bost had that standing. A candidate has a personal stake in the rules that govern the counting of the votes in his election, Roberts said. A candidate who expends additional resources or undergoes reputational harm will be affected by unlawful election rules, he said. He argued in his opinion, the majority opinion, that candidates also have an interest in fair election laws. Candidates are not common competitors in the economic marketplace. They seek to represent the people, and their interest in that prize cannot be served from their interests in in the electoral process. In their dissents, you have Justice Sotomayor and Ketanji Brown Jackson taking issue with Roberts' claim that candidates have a special interest in the fair election process, which gives special rules for standing. They wrote in their dissension, in a democracy and democratic society like ours, the interest in a fair electoral process is common to all members of the voting public. The court thus ignores a core constitutional requirement while unnecessarily thrusting the judiciary into the political arena. So this question about should Illinois count ballots past Election Day, and that really also ties into the issue of mail-in balloting. And during COVID, we saw universal mail-in balloting in the state of Illinois, and now you see universal permanent mail-in balloting, where you can request a permanent mail-in ballot where you will get a mail-in ballot for every election instead of going to the polls or requesting an absentee ballot. We really don't have absentee ballots anymore. Anybody can vote from home and either give it to somebody to then put it into a drop box, and that raises concerns about ballot harvesting. There are obviously laws against that in Illinois, but there's an interesting little loophole with the drop boxes. When you have a mail-in ballot, you yourself can take your mail-in ballot and put it into the drop box, or you yourself can take your mail-in ballot and hand deliver it to the county clerk before the election. You can't do it after the election. Once election day is over, then they start getting the stuff from the mail up to 2 weeks. But the loophole that hasn't really been addressed by the Statehouse is somebody else could go around and grab ballots from a whole community, and if they take that and physically hand it over to the election clerk at your county, that clerk is going to look for some kind of signature from the voter over to you to say, I am handing this ballot to this individual to turn in. That's when they go physically to hand it hand to hand to an election official at the county level. That same type of oversight isn't had at the drop boxes. So you could grab a whole bunch and put them into the drop box, and there's no county clerk there to see if you have that signature handing over the voter's ballot to you to be able to drop into the drop box. So I mean, the mail-in balloting thing is something that obviously is going to have to be addressed. But to this issue of this particular case, it didn't have to do with any of that. The case in front of the U.S. Supreme Court that Mike Bost ultimately got was about standing, and that standing, whether or not Bost had the right as a candidate to sue the State Board of Elections over the 2-week counting. Now, they haven't even gotten to the merits of that question of the can they count federal election results up to 2 weeks after an election day. President Donald Trump's been adamant, saying that number one, we need voter ID. Number two, he doesn't like mail-in balloting, says there could be fraud, so he wants states to do something about that. Congress could change the law to impact federal elections, but that could bifurcate the ballot in Illinois if Illinois wants to continue allowing for mail-in ballots to be counted up to 2 weeks. If Congress was to pass a election day only vote and maybe a high threshold for absentee ballots that could be voted, that could bifurcate the election to have a state election and then the federal election. If the state continues doing 2 weeks after the election to count mail-in ballots with universal and permanent mail-in balloting, but the federal election only allows so much, you can consider the amount of burden that could put on local county clerks, especially when our elections don't include just federal offices, it includes state and local offices as well. So that issue about mail-in balloting has not been addressed yet on the merits, right? The first little preliminary issues that made it up to the U.S. Supreme Court with the opinion coming out yesterday was just about standing. So now this case has to go back down and be dealt with on the standing issue, but it's not the only case out there that is dealing with this. Our reporter Katrina Barker, she talked with Russell Noble, that's Mike Bost's attorney, and he says that the next step they have yet to finalize, and they could depend on developments in a similar case out of Mississippi.
Same thing in Mississippi. If the Supreme Court says ballots received after Election Day violate federal law, then yes, that should apply elsewhere.
So he went on to discuss this issue and what exactly was central to it in the conversation.
Now, keep in mind that this is a pre-election suit, not a post-election suit. And so the court made clear that the standards differ depending on when that is.
He also said the case was filed before any votes were cast. And
when you have a practice that 80% of the public thinks, violates the preferred practice, they should have an explanation in the courts from the courts as to why this is allowed to occur.
So next steps in this case going to be watched closely, especially with what happens in Mississippi. And we're in an election year. Is this going to impact the 2026 election? I guess it depends on how fast the district courts, the appeals courts, and elsewhere deal with this question. All right, it's Illinois in Focus Daily. Wake up with us here each and every weekday morning. I'm Greg Bishop. Thank you so much for being with us. And stay tuned and subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Get the newsletter in your inbox for thecentersquare.com. That's all I got for you guys today. We'll be back at it tomorrow. Conversations about elections and concerns that Americans for Prosperity are raising about local authorities possibly using tax dollars to hire public polling firms and PR firms to advocate for tax increases. We'll also see what, if anything, the Illinois Senate does, and so much more for us to tackle. All right, so stay with us and thecentersquare.com. Have a great Thursday. We'll see you back here tomorrow for more of Illinois in Focus Daily.